Good morning and welcome to Soul Protocol. This is Inner Architecture for Changemakers, and I am your host, Leah Evate, coming to you today from the very lush, green, gorgeous country of Thailand. We just got here 2 days ago, and you know what? 32 hours of travel with your kids and your ex, totally fine. Easy breezy. Just kidding. It was horrendous. It was not an experience that I would wish on my worst enemy if I had one. I probably do have a worst enemy. I'm sure there's someone out there who dislikes me enough to consider themselves my enemy. I'm just considering this for the first time, maybe ever in my life. Huh. I wouldn't wish it on that person, okay? I was not 100% sure that all of us were going to survive. Like, I felt pretty confident that I would make it just because I've done this before and I survived then. I was not 1,000% sure that my children were both going to come out the other end of that trip. Okay. They fought the entire time, every step of the way, over headphones, over a bite of ice cream, over who was going to get to sit in the seat next to me, which is funny and cute because a lot of the rest of the time in their lives, they're like trying to get away, which I also respect. But oh my good God, I could not keep it together. And it got me thinking about the possibility of peace during times of transition. Because listen, this transition of my life has been one of the biggest, and I've done some really big things in my adult life so far. I know a lot of us have, right? I had two children. That was two huge transitions. Well, before that, I started my own career. I got married. When I say I started my own career, I mean I started my own business, which was a huge undertaking. Like, I had never owned a business before, and so it was all new territory. Then I got married. Then I had two children. Then COVID happened. That was its own huge transition. Then we decided to move to Finland because, like, literally spur of the moment. I think we made the decision and moved like 3 weeks later. Then we moved back from Finland a year later. International moves are really, really tumultuous. So both of those transitions were huge. And then we got divorced, probably due to the series of crazy transitions leading up to that moment. And I moved out of the house. I started a new career. Now we're moving to another country all together, my ex, my children, and myself. And so I can't really pin down a span of like an entire 6 months to a year in the last 10 years of my life where things have stayed relatively consistent, like where life has been kind of the same. And on the one hand, I'm extremely grateful for all these experiences because it's how I keep on growing and changing. And I love growing and changing. That's why I'm here. That's why I talk about all this stuff. I believe in the power of the process of change. And also, I am exhausted from changing and I would like things to stay the same for a little while. So, along the way in this series of transitions that has led specifically to us moving to Thailand, I can tell you that my lack of spiritual enlightenment has become absolutely, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, undeniable. Okay. I went from my home in very comfortable Genesee, Colorado, with all of our space and all of our stuff spread out and everything that we could possibly need. It would be access to at our fingertips, and our sports gear and everything for all of our hobbies. The car, was always packed and ready to go with all the kids' activity stuff and just like an entirely made life. Like everything was just there for us. But also the volume of stuff in my life had become really consuming. Like I was starting to recognize that I spent a lot of time taking care of my house and the car and the kids and their activities and my activities and all of our interests and all of these, in a sense, all of these different ways that we defined ourselves, right? Like I'm a dancer, I'm a volleyball player, my kid is a gymnast, my kid is a student, my kid is, and like every one of these identities comes with a bunch of stuff and it comes with all these different time commitments. And life becomes very, very cluttered very quickly. And so, one of my sort of adventures in making the transition from my home in Colorado to ultimately to Thailand was this adventure of minimizing my life. And so today, while we talk about the possibility of having peace during big transitions in life, the first step of our protocol is minimizing. And I had some great successes in this area in the last few months, and I've also had some big failures. I've had, I mean, my moving out of my house. Okay, I've been a realtor for 14 years in Colorado. Never have I ever had a seller not get out of their house on time. Like, there's a contractual remedy for that, and I know what to do as the real estate agent if that happens, but it's never happened. I prepare my sellers pretty well as far as like setting their expectations and making sure that they start to move out and start to pack their stuff early on in the process. And by the time closing day comes, they're moved out. Guess who wasn't moved out of her house on time? It was me. Me. I was my own first client who was not out of my house on time for the closing. In fact, what ended up happening is that the closing was supposed to happen like 4 or 5 in the afternoon. It was sort of a flexible time frame because we were doing it online. The buyers had signed earlier in the day. And to be fair, the buyers were not moving in the same day that I was moving out. So I probably had this in the back of my mind, like giving myself this extra leeway. But I ended up signing my documents with a remote notary at 11:30 at night, like barely before the midnight deadline. And I still had a few things back at the house that I had to move out. So I was at my brother's house, I'm signing the documents, then I had to go back to my other house, pick up the last load of stuff, and bring it back to my brother's house. And in the midst of all of that, my brother and the guy I was dating, and my dad, and my mom, my dear mom, oh my God, she was such a trooper. I had like upended all of these people's schedules because at the last minute, I was still not prepared and ready. And this is, I like hate to say it, but this is kind of the story of me making big transitions. Like I never feel fully prepared. Okay, so that was a big failure number one, right? But as I'm minimizing my life, because my first round of minimizing happened when I moved into my brother's house, because I had a 4-month gap to fill. So the brother's house was the best option. I put all of my stuff in storage, except for about I probably sold 2/3 of my furniture. So I like sell a ton of stuff and art, all kinds of stuff. I sell it all off. Everything that's left, I put into storage. I gave away about 30 houseplants. I packed 3 big plastic bins full of stuff, brought them to my brother's house, And that was everything that the kids and I lived off of for those 4 months from the time that I sold my home in March until we actually started making the move to Thailand in the summertime. I can't tell you how many essentials, I mean, like, essentials ended up getting packed away when they should have been in those bins, and how much extra stuff ended up in the bins that should have been packed away. It was just a messy process, but the downsizing actually felt really good because all of a sudden now I was like, okay, I have 3 bins of stuff in my life, and that's all I have to manage, and coming from this huge house that was full to the brim of stuff, and then minimizing down to just 3 big plastic tubs was like, all right, like, we are we're not gonna be doing all of our sports, we're not gonna be doing all of our activities, but we are gonna have a really good summer, and it's gonna be easy. And I wouldn't say it was easy, but it was a step in that direction. And so we did that. Then the kids moved out to Finland, and I started traveling. The first place I traveled to was Minnesota. Then I traveled to Maine, then from Maine to Finland for like 2 or 3 weeks. And for all of this traveling around, I had a carry-on suitcase, a big suitcase, and a backpack, which was a lot to haul around, but it's a very, very small amount of stuff to actually own for your home, for your life, for a new life that you're starting on the other side of the world. We didn't ship anything out. There's no shipping container involved. My car and all of my other big things are back in storage in Colorado. So this is literally it. But I had to drag this stuff around for a few weeks while I was traveling on my way out to Thailand. Then we get to Thailand after 32 hours of travel, glorious, lovely travel with my fighting children. And we've already stayed in 2 Airbnbs. And I'm tired. I'm so tired. So but I was grateful to myself for reducing the amount of stuff that I was going to be carrying with me, because this is the conclusion. This is the philosophical conclusion I've come to after doing all of this reduction. It's that real preparedness is needing less, adapting more, and employing multifunctionality. It's like, how few things can I possibly live off of? And when you challenge yourself to do that, suddenly you feel very prepared, actually. Because if something doesn't go according to plan, you don't have this sense of like, oh my God, I don't have my XYZ to help me through this situation. It's just like, I'm just going to figure it out. I'm just going to figure it out as I go. So minimizing is the first step of the protocol because it helps us to get to a place where we're not distracted by all of the stuff in our lives, the way that I was when I was living in my big house in Colorado. All right, step 2 of our protocol. And I did this without realizing that I was doing it. Like, I didn't do it consciously in the beginning, but over the course of the traveling, I came to understand that there was one core message that I was communicating to the people I was traveling with, to the people I was around as I was traveling and like who I was visiting. And that message for me has been kindness. I don't know how many times I've said the word kindness to my children in the last 3 weeks. I think I've said it at least 200 times. But it really became sort of this mantra of like, okay, we're doing this thing. There's a lot of turmoil. There's going to be a lot of unexpected twists and turns, which definitely there have been. And through all of that, we're just going to be kind to each other. Like, we might feel impatient. We might feel exhausted. I think there was a moment in the airport where my son was actually falling asleep while walking. And then we got to Bangkok and he just had to crash on the a booth at a cafe for like 5 hours because he couldn't. I wasn't 5. It might have been 3. I don't know. Time, I don't know. But it's like all of these emotions are going to exist. All of these experiences are going to exist. The tiredness and the exasperation and the frustration and the disappointment when things don't go the way that you want them to go. And through all of that, I was just insisting on kindness. And I had to insist on it in myself too, because have definitely been some moments where I did not feel patient, loving, and warm inside. But I do think that just the kind of constant reiteration of this core message was really helpful. So if you're going through your own transition, that message could be whatever your core message for your family or your crew needs to be, right? It's not going to be the same for everybody, but I think something very simple and streamlined that sort of helps to smooth over whichever situations come up or serves as a reminder, if nothing else, just for yourself, can be really powerful. Step 3 of the protocol for maintaining peace during transition is to hold the paradox. Because peace and turmoil feel mutually exclusive. But without the moment that we decide that they're mutually exclusive, the moment that we set in our mind a expectation that we're either going to have one or the other, that becomes the truth. It's only when we can say, I believe that peace in the midst of turmoil is possible, that it actually becomes possible. These two things can coexist. But the first step to them coexisting is the belief that it's possible that they can. And then step 4 of the protocol is to find that peace. And when we're in the midst of big transitions, when we're making big changes in our life in any way, shape, or form, it could be a career, a relationship that's changing. Kids are always changing. They grow so fast. Like if you're not transitioning logistically, you're transitioning emotionally as they mature. Hopefully they mature as they get older. Mine sometimes feel like they kind of go up and then anyway. It's the trick is to find that stillness in very, very small moments. To say, okay, I'm not going to try to tackle the big picture here. I'm just going to take this moment and be very present with it. Because at the center of this moment, at the very core of my experience, is a stillness that is just ready to see things exactly the way they are and celebrate them exactly the way they are, and is at peace with exactly the way things are. So when I'm standing in the airport and trying to talk to the gentleman behind the counter about getting our bags to we had to at one point reschedule certain flights because we had to spend the day in Bangkok to get birth certificates certified. And then we weren't sure whether our bags were going to go here or there or going to keep going, whatever. There was a lot of communication that had to happen with airport personnel to figure out where our bags were going to be. And as we are communicating amongst the adults, the children were just not having it, right? Like they were rapidly losing patience with this process and starting to fight with each other and starting to pester us and the whole thing. And I remember there was this one moment where we were sitting and waiting for someone to come talk to us about our bags. And I had, I think, a total of like 40 seconds max where I wasn't being bombarded by something. And in that 40 seconds, I probably found about 17 seconds of real stillness. It was not a meditation. It was not a it was not a nervous system exercise. It was just it was just a very brief moment to remind me that the peace is still there. And during the course of all of this traveling that I did, that was just about the most peace that I could conjure, especially once I was with my kids, because before I was traveling with kids, I had plenty of time to be like, I'm going to go sit on the patio for 20 minutes and meditate. My friend Margaret and I actually did a meditation on a patio together in Maine. And it was like, oh, it's so lovely to be around another woman who just loves to sit in silence. And like, we can just sit in silence together. And isn't this just the most calming, peaceful experience you've ever had? And I went from that uh, to a couple weeks alone with my kids in Finland, where there was not a waking moment. There was not a waking 20 minutes for me to meditate. And so the stillness, the calm was accessed in these very, very brief moments. And it just brought me back to the moment, brought me fully into the experience that I was having with my kids, even when it was tumultuous and they were starting to argue or whatever they're doing. And it's not just the kids, right? It's like the entire experience of travel. It's the airport people who you're trying to communicate with and you're speaking different languages and you're just doing lots of hand motions, and like turmoil happens in all of these ways, but there's still a peace, a sense of deep, deep, deep peace at the very center of it all. It is our soul living inside this wild material experience, living inside this body, having this perspective and telling this story. But our soul is at the center of that. And the soul isn't afraid of turmoil. The soul isn't afraid of all of this jostling around that happens in the material world. And that is part of the human experience. I think there's, in spiritual circles, a lot of times there's this emphasis on stillness and meditation and prayer and minimalism and modesty and or humility. And it's a wonderful ideal. But if you're a mother, if you're a father, if you have bills to pay because you don't live in a monastery, then you have to integrate your spiritual life with your real human life. You have to integrate your spirituality with your parenting, or integrate your spirituality with your corporate career. Whatever it is, it's not necessarily going to, you're not necessarily going to have a life that lends itself to sitting peacefully on a mountaintop and finding nirvana there. You're probably going to have a life where nirvana exists only in these very, very brief moments. But tapping into that, saying like, okay, this is still possible for me. This peace, this tranquility, it's still here. It's right at the center. So I hope that you can go out into the turmoil of your life today and find those very brief moments of stillness. And I hope that in the stillness, there is a greater sense of self and wellness and connection to something bigger, something more purposeful, a perspective and a story that is playing out where the turmoil is just a brief chapter. I love you all so much. And I can't wait to see you next week. Thank you for being here with me. Thank you for liking, subscribing, and doing all the things that help me keep this podcast going. I'm going to keep churning out content every week. This one was very spur of the moment, very impromptu, and I hope that there was still enough meat in it to get you through the week. I love you, love you, love you. And I'll see you on Instagram and YouTube and all the other places. Bye for now.